that title theme certainly brings back memories. You know how we all had those few games as a kid we loved, then came back and realized, oh shit, this is actually really, really bad. Dynowarz Destruction of Spondylus was my biggest one of those. I played the shit out of this as a kid on my dad's NES, technically. And, oh boy, it's, wow. We start off with a platforming section. Controls are what you'd expect for NES. A is jump, B is fire. You got a little spread gun. It's faster to walk over spikes like this than it is to jump on the platform, just because you can take the damage. And when you jump in this game in particular, at least in these normal platforming sections, you actually have a bit of wind-up for it, so you need to time around that. Also, that was a health restore. There are 3 potential power-ups in those sections. We'll get into those later. Because it's time for the reason I absolutely loved this game as a kid. We get to control a robot dinosaur. With, honestly, pretty good cutscene graphic there at the start. In fact, I will say, outside of the main stages at least, this game's actually pretty good looking. And I just died, and we get a password, and you get sent right back to the title screen, but this is one of those games that has a continue option for you that sets you basically exactly where you were. During the robot dinosaur sections, you are sent exactly to the screen you died at, but during the platforming sections where you play as the dude, you're sent back to the beginning of those sections. During the dinosaur sections, you have a few various weapons you can get. You start off with just the punch, but enemies will eventually drop little attack parts that can lead to certain other ones. Like, for instance, I just picked up a fireball. That one there is a launch fist. Avoid that at all costs. There's also a beam, a bomb, and I think that's it off the top of my head. And this is one of those games that allows you to upgrade your weapon if you stick with it. For instance, there's another fireball. Now I have 2 of them. More or less, every single upgrade just increases, I think, the amount of them, except for the third one, which increases damage as well as size, I believe. If you want my recommendation, stick with fireball or beam. Stay away from bomb and especially launch fist. Well, actually, no, reverse that. Stick away from launch fist and especially bomb. Also, that mine there on the ground in front of us is very ridiculously placed. If you jump on top of it, you will get knocked back into that pit. Most sections outside of the... when you're in the dinosaur, rather, are structured almost the exact same. You have the first screen, which is outdoor, second screen, which is indoor, third screen, which is outdoor again. And there's power-ups, but we'll get into that for a bit because we have our first boss here against what I think is supposed to be a Tyrannosaurus Rex robot. Just spam fire for every single boss fight. It works until, like, the final boss. And now for the main platforming sections outside of the dinosaur. These are the ones you're basically going to be doing in every stage, since what we have to do here is go through it, beat the boss at the end, and then come all the way back out. Now, in terms of the power-ups you can get in all of the stages, there's E, which is just a health restore. There's a B icon, which is a barrier, which will fill that barrier bar beneath your energy bar, which is basically a second health bar. And then there's a P icon. When you're as just the dude, the P icon serves as a blaster power-up. I think it can go up to at least 3. I've only ever gotten it to 2. In which case, like it is right now, you just get increased rapid fire. As the dinosaur, I think it extends your health, I think. Overall, it's very basic game, and I should mention that whenever I die in the platforming sections, I'm editing back to that point, because you do have to replay the entire thing. And what we just saw, the bosses at the end of these little platforming sections are nothing substantial. It's usually just a couple enemies and that giant thing on the right of the room. It's very, very basic, and it's a very short game as well. We're only here for 7 stages total, and we've seen basically every cutscene aside from the final one the game has to offer for us. The end of the stage is those little platforms. You jump on them, and you get sent up into the air, get the new password for the next stage, and you start the next stage. The way that passwords work in this game, though, is that there's not one for, say, every dinosaur section and every platforming section. It is for the stage in general. Like, say, if you died and turned off the console at the platforming section of stage 3, you would be sent to the beginning of the dinosaur section of Stage 3, because now the setup is going to be dinosaur section, platforming section, and stage. Only the first stage has that little prior platforming section. And now we get to do this for 6 more stages. So let's go over the plot, because there is one. It's only in the manual, though, I believe. It might be on the box, too, I forget. Something was terribly wrong in the distant man-made Spondylus solar system. One by one, the planet's central life support computers have been infected with a life-threatening virus, while the planet's surfaces have been overrun with giant computerized dinosaurs, known as robosaurs. Very, very original. Under attack in his laboratory on Alpha Planet, Professor Proteus, the mastermind of the Spondylus system and founder of the Robosaur project, suddenly realized that this deadly sabotage could only be the work of his former partner, the deranged Dr. Brainius. Years earlier, the Doctor had fled Alpha Planet after Professor Proteus had exposed him for performing forbidden robotic experiments on human subjects. At last, he had returned to seek his revenge using the Professor's own creations. But little did he realize that Proteus had been hard at work for the past few years perfecting the ultimate Robosaur, Cyborosaurus. There was only one hope to save the Spondylus system. Cybersaurus must be unleashed. The Dynowarz must begin. Talk about inconsequential plots that are only in the manual, because we are playing as Professor Proteus, that's the blue guy, but we never see a Dr. Brainius in the game. But, yeah, that's just dumb. Mind you, there might be a good reason for that. This is very much like, I think it's at least the entirety of Star Tropics, in that Dynowarz was developed and released only ever in America. Well, no, it was developed in Japan, but only released in America. I think the exact date was April-ish 1990. And it is published by Bandai, which, you know, that's their big thing. They publish a lot of shit. That was a bomb, by the way, avoid those. But in terms of the development, it was developed by Advanced Communication Company, who have actually done a couple other games of note. They did Super Godzilla on the Super Nintendo. They did basically any of the Yeast ports for Nintendo consoles back in the 90s. I think specifically 1 through 4 on the NES and SNES. They did one of the Pat Labor games, because I know there were a couple of those. But perhaps most infamously, a game they developed back in April of 1988 and released over here in the States in April of 1989, of angry video game nerd fame, was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which I still think is one of the worst games I've ever played in my life. And, oh boy. I can say for a fact this is a better game than Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but there's no reason to really go back to this game after you finish watching this. In fact, I'm going to say for a fact that I'm probably going to run out of things to say at some point, because this game, the structure it uses is a solid one, but it never deviates from this. It tries to have a difficulty curve slightly by having longer platforming sections at the end, punishing you more for death, and introducing a few new enemies along the way. But that's about it. The only thing that really changes overall is enemies. And by that I mean they add a couple as you go through, which are generally just normal enemy versions of the boss fights you fought in earlier stages. Like, for instance, in this stage, the boss in the dinosaur section that I completely neglected to talk about was that pterodactyl beast one. That'll become a normal enemy in stage 3 onwards. That's about all there is. And oh boy, that didn't influence me much as a kid, but now that I'm older and actually, you know, can analyze stuff, that's very flawed game design. That means there's very little sense of progression and very little incentive to continue on. Also, that's Launch Fist. Launch Fist is probably my second least favorite weapon in the game, as I mentioned earlier. As it gets upgraded, it gets faster, and I think just does more damage. In terms of what the weapons overall do, that's the level 3 Launch Fist. It doesn't really change too much. The bomb, which I think no, that's the beam. Which, thank you for getting. The bomb just fires a really awkwardly arced bomb forward. I think it gets 2 bombs on the 3rd power-up and 3 larger on the 3rd. Beam is overall my favorite weapon in the game because I think it does the most damage per shot, even though it has a low rate of fire. The only problem with Beam is that it can not hit things due to how low they are sometimes. In terms of what power-ups it gets, on level 2, it gets a little fireball that goes diagonally up from you. And on the 2nd power-up, it gets a thicker beam and 2 larger fireballs. Fireball just slowly becomes the normal Professor Proteus spread gun with larger bullets and I think more damage overall. And, well, you see what level 3 Launch Fist does. Yeah, this is Bomb. I hate Bomb with a passion. Avoid it as much as you can. I have actually never tried to go through this game only ever using the punch that the Cyborosaurus starts with. I think it's almost impossible to do that, too, because I think the pterodactyl bosses can't be reached without a weapon. So that's kind of stupid. My best advice, honestly, even though I don't do it until about over halfway through the game, in the robot stages at least, because you can't really do them in the platforming stages, just tank damage and walk through most of the enemies. Because you get a checkpoint at the end of every single one of the 3 sections in the Cyborosaurus stages, there's no incentive to really fight anything, except for maybe something to get a non-punch ability in the 3rd screen, which I think there's almost a guaranteed drop of something in that. Which, kind of dumb. Some enemies also like to behave weirdly when you hit them, like they'll run towards you. Part of me thinks they might have some weird weakness system where some enemies will get more aggressive with certain weapons and thus charge towards you, but it also doesn't feel like that would be something they'd have the effort to program. This is a very game. I should mention, by the way, that blue thing, I may have mentioned this or like not even 10 minutes ago. I forget already. That blue thing is a key that allows you to actually enter the platforming section. It's basically a, you need to beat the boss first before going in here sort of thing. Also, I really like that dinosaur head sprite there on the bottom left. It's weird. This game both looks meh, but also good for Nintendo Entertainment System standards. Because some of the sprites, especially in the cutscenes, are really well done. But some of the actual sprites in the stages are not ugly, because there are certainly worse looking games in the system. Cheetah Man. But there's so little to do with them. But they at least animate, which is better than another, like, third of NES games. I should mention, by the way, during the platforming sections, there's a good likelihood you might glitch into a wall when you jump. Not like into the actual walls, but say like on the platforms in the previous room, you might try to land on top, but you'll land on top of the second block down, which is not how it should work. Thankfully, you just need to jump to get out of that. What we're looking at right here is the largest challenge in the game, the moving platforms. There are 2 varieties of them, well, technically 3. Those that move horizontally, those that move vertically, and those that fall when you jump. The best advice I can give you with them is jump when they're at the opposite extreme of what you need them to be. Like, say if you need to jump on this floating platform, try to jump when it's towards the top of its movements. That way, you'll time yourself so that you can get on it when it's at the lowest. Same with the horizontal ones, but you need to be a bit more judgmental on that yourself, because there are times where the pathways are long enough that you might not make it if you jump all the way when they're on the right, but sometimes you will. It's weird. You also basically need to land exactly on top of them, because if you hit them from an angle, you are extraordinarily likely to clip through them like that. The best thing about this game, honestly, is the soundtrack, because it is catchy. And I'm just not just talking about that because I played this game a lot as a kid. I legitimately love the platforming stage themes, the credits theme, and the title theme. Some of them are extraordinarily short loops, but they're pretty good songs, honestly. Also, you can skip these cutscenes by pressing, I think it's the A or B button, but that's technically skipping content. Really, though, oh, actually, no, that does remind me of something. Well, actually, no, I should come to this first. One thing I can give this game, better level environment variety than some other NES games, because you at least get different looking planets every single time. One thing I do believe is in the game is I think there's technically an extra password. I think it's like all 7s, and I think it allows you to view all the enemies, I think. I've only ever seen one source talk about that, and I haven't confirmed it myself, so I have no way of knowing if it's actually true. But that does seem like something that could happen. It's so weird to think about games that you played a lot as a kid, only to realize older that they are not what you thought they were, because there are a couple of games like that I played on the NES. This was the king of them, as was, what was the name of it? The one Simpsons game on NES, where you have to find the aliens, and it was all purple. I remember AVGN talked about it in one of his videos as well. I'm in the ground now. Okay. But I played that a lot as a kid and thought it was fun. It's really not. There was also the highlight. Let me look down at my NES collection, actually, because I might not have all of them here because my brother took a lot of his NES games with him at some point when he moved out. Wow, my own NES collection is actually smaller than I thought. Let's see. Dragon Warrior, Mario Duck Hunt, Dr. Mario, Mario 2, Final Fantasy, Mario 3, Simon's Quest, Lolo, Galaga, Mega Man 6, Crystallis. Is there actually something in my NES? I don't think there is. If there is, it's probably the original Castlevania or one of the other Mega Man games. Because I think I own the original Castlevania on my NES, unless... Oh, wait, no, actually, no, that was my brother's. That was my brother's. Now I just have a bunch of NES carts on my lap. You might hear me placing them back into the drawer. I apologize for that. I also need to dust these things off because the tops of them have gotten dusty in my drawer. Because I actually don't have, like, a proper storage thing for these. I just put them in one of my desk drawers with, like, the dust covers on the bottom for the contacts, obviously, but... nothing on the top, so like Lolo's label is all dusty and shit like that, as is Dragon Warrior's. I'm actually wondering how loud that is on my mic, because the drawer that they're on is right below my mic. It's actually funny thinking back, though, because I remember the day we actually got sent the Super Mario Bros. 2 cartridge. Because I didn't get that myself. My mom's best friend, who she met in the military, Lisa, sent that to me in the mail one day, which is quite the distance to make it from California to Massachusetts, by the way, in like 2002 or 3. But I played the shit out of it back then, and man, it's still not very Mario, but I can have fun with it, and the soundtrack is fantastic. Either way, at this point, really, the game, Dynowarz, really gets too repetitive for its own good. What it really could have used at this point, because we're 4 out of the 7 stages in, is probably more level gimmicks, like maybe a water level, fire level, something like that beyond just the environmental changes on the dinosaur stages. Because the Proteus stages don't really change much at all, which I can understand that part, to some extent. Because these are supposed to be labs that Proteus himself basically set up with his company to keep these life support systems in check. It makes me question why there's spikes and bottomless pits in them, but I'll just assume that was... What was the guy's name? Brainius or some shit? Yeah, Brainius. These are the third kind of platform, by the way, the ones that fall when you get on top of them. They're probably the least threatening ones of all, because you can just... You jump on them and jump immediately and you're safe. Also, this is a very well-designed boss fight. You don't need to stand on that platform at all. You can just stand here and shoot him. Although, for all I can tell, I might have just found a way to consistently glitch enough into the wall that my bullets will spawn outside of the pillar. This is a brilliantly designed game. Also, I'd like to note, we're about 18, 19 minutes in at this point, I think. The world record for this game is 18.5 minutes. Which... Wow, I'm not very surprised at that. I think what they do for most of it is just walk through the enemies, too, like I mentioned earlier. Jumping can waste a significant amount of time, as can dying. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here, actually. I was conflicted on whether or not I should have this as one 40-ish minute video, or 2 18 to 20-minute videos, roughly. My friends actually advised me to split up into 2, though, just so I could find more stuff to talk about in between them. And you know what? I'm going to heed their advice on that. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2, we'll be doing the rest of the game, plain and simple. There's not really much else to say about that. See you guys then.